Hello and welcome to another video of the Synaptics. If you are here after watching the previous video, then thank you from me to all of you. Like always, only watch the video if you want to learn something, or you can move your ass by skipping this. Now let's start quickly before wasting any time. Picture this: you are in a chat, surrounded by individuals discussing trivialities, the latest buzz, some shallow news, a repeating theme that leads nowhere. You try to join the conversation, seeking to bring a deeper thought, a more intriguing analysis, yet all you receive are blank stares, fast changes of subject, or worse, that sense that no one really knew what you meant. And then comes that inevitable conclusion: maybe it's better if I stay silent. If this sounds familiar, you're not alone, however. The problem is not you. The problem is that intelligence does not bring people closer. It separates them. The more you understand the complexities of the world, the harder it becomes to discover someone who sees the same as you. And don't be deceived. This intellectual loneliness is not merely a product of your perception. Society subconsciously rejects those who believe differently. Arthur Schopenhauer, one of the most violent and honest philosophers in history, believed that great brilliance is not a gift, but a curse. A weight that isolates those who look beyond the facade of everyday life. According to Etienne, the more you comprehend the inconsistencies of the world, the more frustrating it becomes to attempt to explain them to those who dwell on the surface. After all, most people do not desire the truth. They want comfort. And here is the question: if intelligence leads to solitude, what is the way out? How can you survive in a world where it seems that no one thinks like you? If you have ever felt this disconnection, this emptiness that comes from the lack of a true intellectual exchange, then this video is for you. Because perhaps the problem is not your loneliness, but rather what it shows. Regarding the world around you, is intelligence a gift or a curse? On paper, it appears evident that being more intelligent should make life easier. You learn things faster, identify trends that others ignore, avoid faults that most people make. But in practice, the same intellect that should be an advantage turns into an invisible wall that divides you from the rest of the globe. Arthur Schopenhauer knew this better than anyone. For him, extreme intelligence condemns a person to loneliness, because most folks simply do not want to think genuinely, not because they are incapable, yet because there is no social advantage in doing so. Why dig into philosophical questions, query dogmas, see the hypocrisy of institutions, if all of this only brings discomfort? For most people, life is simpler when they accept the reality as it is without asking uncomfortable questions. But you can't help it. Your brain is always working, always analyzing, always seeing subtleties that others ignore. You notice when people lie to themselves, when they cling to illusions simply because it is easier than facing reality. You experience the frustration of trying to explain things and learning that no one is really listening, not because they disagree with you, but because what you say does not conform into the comfortable narrative they have constructed for themselves. And that is the essential point. Society does not value truth. It values conformity. There is an unseen structure that keeps everything functioning, and this structure depends on people believing in some illusions that happiness lies in consumption, that success is following a predefined course, that common sense is always right. Those who question these ideas become a nuisance, a piece out of place. This explains why throughout history, great thinkers have been rejected before being acknowledged. Socrates was dispatched, sentenced to death, for influencing the children simply because he asked questions that exposed the ignorance of the forceful. Galileo was punished for saying anything as plain as the fact. The idea the earth revolves around the sun, and was scorned and deemed mad for attacking the basis of Christian morals. Nikola Tesla died forgotten, while others gained from his inventions. Do you think it would be different nowadays? Technology has evolved, but human nature remains the same. We still live in a society that punishes people who think differently. Rejection may not be as explicit as in the time of the Inquisition, but is still happening today. It is social isolation, the feeling of being hard to understand, the difficulty in meeting people who actually share your worldview. And this leads us to the key question: is the problem in intelligence or in the world? Maybe perhaps the underlying cause for the isolation of the most intelligent is not a lack of social skills, but the fact that for most people, truth is something uncomfortable. What you see clearly, others prefer not to see. And this intentional blindness, this refusal to look beyond the superficial, is what generates the barrier between you and the rest of the world. If there is one thing that society dread more than anything else, it is someone who thinks independently. Most people follow an unseen script, repeating pre-made ideas without ever questioning them, and that is the fundamental reason why intelligence does not bring people closer. It drives them away. Think of it: when you encounter someone physically strong than you might feel admiration. When you observe someone wealthier, you may feel envy, but rarely animosity. But when you exhibit superior intellect, the reaction is not one of adoration or envy, it is one of resistance. Because whereas strength or riches are external advantages, intelligence exposes something much more sensitive: the constraints of others. The sheer presence of a profound thinker forces people to confront their own cognitive defects, and no one appreciates that intelligence works like a mirror, reflecting what others do not want to see. How restricted their beliefs might be, how superficial their chats have become, how much they live in a loop of distraction and conformity. And what does a human being do when they feel uncomfortable? They attack or ignore. This explains why the thinker has always been considered as a danger. Schopenhauer realized that society not only rejects those who question its structures, it punishes them. He replied that the further someone distinguishes themselves from mediocrity, the more solitary they become, because most people simply do not want to face reality in a world that values convenience. The truth is too weighty a burden to bear, and this rejection does not happen only on an intellectual level. It occurs in everyday life, in little details. You produce an intriguing observation and others look away. You bring a different point of view and someone changes the subject. You see patterns, things no one wants to admit, and are categorized as negative or complex. It is a delicate but persistent procedure, a progressive distancing that drives you to the margins simply because you perceive what others attempt to overlook. But this rejection does not mean you are wrong. On the opposite, it suggests you are perceiving beyond the smoke, veil that keeps most individuals trapped in their illusions. And that is why intelligence leads to isolation, not because the intelligent choose to be alone, but because the world wants to push them aside. If you have ever felt alienated due of your manner of pondering, you may have realized that because loneliness is not usually caused by others, often you chose it yourself. At first, there is a sincere effort to connect, to share your ideas, to find someone who sees the world in the same approach. Yet over time, when interactions become frustrating, empty, or simply tiresome, an inescapable conclusion arises. Maybe it's better to be alone. Schopenhauer believed that clever people often prefer solitude, not out of disdain for society, but out of necessity. He remarked that for those who think deeply, the world frequently feels like a superficial spectacle, a theater where most pretend to comprehend things they had never paused to ponder. Trying to participation in this theater requires an absurd mental exertion, and in the end, the reward is minimal. The price of socialization is often the irritation of interactions, lacking substance. Interactions where one has to degrade oneself intellectually only to be understood, and then the distancing happened first. You start to shun certain social circles when you believe that your views are not welcome. Then you begin to better choose your interactions, seeking discussions that have some importance, and finally you know that the best company is often your own mind, not because you disdain others, but because they seem to have nothing to give beyond fleeting diversions. But here lies the trap. This isolation, which at first seems like a shelter, can swiftly become a jail. The mind of a thinker never stops. It is always whirling, analyzing, questioning, and without someone to exchange ideas with. Without intellectual challenges, idea can create a closed cycle where anything makes sense only within your own viewpoint. Intelligence can distance you from ignorance. Yet it may also trap you in your own bubble of understanding, because that is where loneliness changes into something deeper, a type of psychological exile, where even when surrounded by individuals you do not feel part of anything. You may even interact, laugh, discuss about trivialities, but deep inside you realize something is missing. A true dialogue, a genuine exchange of concepts. The tragic tragedy of self-imposed isolation is that it is not a decision in the traditional sense. No one wants to be entirely alone, but when the world offers only superficiality, when relationships become a hardship instead of a joy, loneliness seems the only reasonable path. And that is the great irony. The more you grasp the world, the less place there seems to be for you in it. If intellect is something so valuable, why does society repeatedly reject it? Why are those who look beyond ridiculed, ignored, or even insulted? The response is simple. The world is not built for thinkers, it is built for conformists. Society, since its has always favored those who followed the regulations, not those who questioned them. From school, we are trained to obey, not to think. We learn to memorize information without questioning it, to accept ready-made truths without examining them. The student who asks too many queries is bothersome. The employee who suggests changes undermines the stability of the company. The citizen who challenging the dominant narrative is viewed as a problem. Schopenhauer saw this clearly. He believed that the world was controlled by a system of collective mediocrity, where independent thought was viewed as a hazard. He noted that most individuals do not want the truth, they want comfort, and the truth is rarely pleasant. This explains why the great philosophers throughout history were rejected before being recognized. Socrates was sentenced to death for opposing the values of Athens. Galileo was punished for arguing that the earth was not the center of the universe. Nature was dubbed angry for revealing the paradoxes of Christian morality, and even in modern times, when revolutionary intellectuals are often discredited before being accepted. But this resistance to intelligence is not limited to great names in philosophy and science. It happens every day in small details. It occurs when you try to have a deep conversation, and people look away, impatient when you suggest a different point of view, and are immediately rejected when you discover patterns that others disregard, and instead of curiosity receive indifference. The truth is that society not only fails to value crucial thinking, it actively discourages it. Because those who think too much are not easy to control. They do not accept whatever narrative. They are not satisfied with simple answers, and this threatens a system that relies on conformity to function. And here lies the greatest paradox. Society requires intellectuals to evolve, but at the same time rejects them. It wants the benefits of intellect, technology, scientific advancements, philosophical innovations, but does not desire to deal with the discomfort that profound thinking brings. It is why those who see beyond others have always been and will always be a minority, a lonely minority, but a vital minority. Extreme intelligence not only isolated, it can be a hefty burden to bear. It is not simply society's rejection that hurts, yet the very effect of great comprehension on the mind. Schopenhauer observed this severely. The more one realizes reality, the tougher it becomes to take pleasure in it. Most individuals live in illusions. They believe there is a fundamental meaning to life, that there is justice in the world, that effort will always remain rewarded. They believe in concepts like destiny, luck, and merit. These notions keep people inspired, give purpose, and make them continue moving forward even in the face of obstacles. But a deep thinker, perhaps someone who actually questions these premises, sooner or later arrives at an unpleasant conclusion. None of this is guaranteed, and this is the fundamental difference between the typical man and the thinker. The ordinary man can fool himself, and this delusion keeps him cheerful. The thinker, on the other hand, perceives the world as it actually is: chaotic, indifferent, full of contradictions. He realizes that morality is not absolute, but a social construct, that the quest of happiness is often just a fruitless race after desires programmed by culture, that most individuals do not desire the truth, only validation for their pre-existing views. And this is where intellect becomes a weight, because once you see, you can no longer unsee. You cannot simply turn off your head. and pretend that everything makes sense. You cannot return to comfortable ignorance. As Nietzsche wrote, when you look deep into the abyss glances back at you. This is the price of understanding, a growing disconnection from the world surrounding. While some celebrate tiny triumphs, a new automobile, a promotion at work, a brief relationship, the thinker wonders, does this really matter? What is pleasing to most appears shallow to him, and this feeling of displacement grows little by little until he feels like a stranger in his own time. It is little wonder that many of the greatest intellectuals in history experience melancholy and even depression. Pascal described the infinite silence of the universe as something frightening. Card spoke about the sorrow of being an isolated individual. Kafka changed the feeling of estrangement into literature. Schopenhauer, undoubtedly the most pessimistic of all, saw life as an infinite circle of desires and frustrations where the only escape was total surrender. But here lies the huge ask. Whether intelligence condemns us to view the truth without illusions, how can we live without being consumed by it? Is there a road between pleasant ignorance and extreme despair? This is the question that separates those who just suffer from their brilliance from those who learn to use it. And the answer may lie precisely in the acceptance of one's own solitude. If intelligence leads to loneliness, and a profound understanding of the world can become a burden, what remains? What can someone who looks beyond the superficial do to escape being overwhelmed by their own mind? Schopenhauer felt that the only way for a thinker to uncover any form of peace was to embrace their solitude and redirect their efforts into something productive. He argued that intelligent people should not waste time trying to fit into a civilization that would never completely understand them. Instead, they should embrace solitude as a privilege, not as a punishment. But this is certainly not an easy answer, because bottom down, every human being wants connection. Even the most intellectually independent desire to be understood, want to find someone who shares their perspective, who can offer a true dialogue. The problem is that the interactions are rare, and expecting society as a whole to value the depth of idea is a mistake. So what to do? The first thing is to comprehend that intellectual solitude does not mean total solitude. There are ways to find like-minded minds, whether through books, philosophy, intellectual communities, or even in art. Many of the finest minds in history led solitary lives, but ideas surpassed their time because they were recorded, discussed, and eventually understood. The second thing is to direct your intelligence towards something meaningful. A mind that does not find problems and purpose quickly becomes a trap for itself, generating discovery continually. Learning all of this can transform the weight of intelligence into a powerful tool, and fully acknowledge that the world will constantly resist those who think differently. Society never embraced its outstanding minds while they were alive. Only later, when their ideas were no longer viewed as hazardous, did they become admired. This implies that if you feel like you don't fit in, you might be exactly where you should be. But now I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt that your way of thinking separates you? That the people around you simply cannot keep up with your worldview? Leave your comment here and share your experience. And don't stop here. If this video made sense to you, then the next one is critical. Click and keep watching because this conversation is not over yet.